The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. 20 international chess professionals compete in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the second annual Fall Chess Classic. Hello, chess fans. You are looking live at the boardroom in the tournament hall at the St. Louis Chess Club, the world-famous St. Louis Chess Club, and we have some heavy hitters in there today for you. 2,500, 2,600 level players are all in combat, and they have been for a couple of hours. So come on in and stay a while as we give you up-to-date information on the games. My name is Ben Simon.
And my name is Eric Rosen, and I'm excited to begin the tournament and looking forward to some exciting days of chess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of your favorite baseball teams might be out of the playoffs, but you're in luck because this is the Fall Chess Classic. And this is one of the quarterly classic tournaments here at the St. Louis Chess Club where we have two fields. One is the really strong 2,600 field, and the other is the 2,500 usually. And there's anything from norms on the line, there's pride, glory, a lot of money, so it's very exciting chess. And we're going to be bringing you abbreviated coverage of all 9 days of this event for 90 minutes every day, and then at the end we will take it to its finale, no matter how long it goes.
I must say it's good to be back too. First time doing commentary was for the Summer Classic just a few months ago. I was doing it with woman Grandmaster Katerina Nemtsova, who unfortunately is not here, pursuing a PhD somewhere on this planet. But it's good to be with you, Ben. And I do want to say, in order to get off to a good start, I got you a gift. It's a pumpkin celebrating the fall season.
It is a pumpkin. Oh, well, thanks, man. You shouldn't have done that. Wow.
My pleasure.
Man, this is a really great pumpkin. Where's the stem?
There's no stem. It was the only pumpkin that was perfectly round, or almost perfectly round, and it only cost 99 cents at Whole Foods. So it's pretty cheap there. At
least you got a discount on it. We'll leave it there. This is good. This is very themed. You know, Halloween's coming.
That was intention.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, without further ado, let's take a look at our player roster for our Masters division. It's Group A. Oh, man. Okay, so here's what we have here. World rank on the left side. We have a lot. We have 6 top 100 players in this field, and we have Eric Hansen, too, who's inactive. But very strong field. 8 federations are represented in this group. Eric, what do you make of this?
I mean, when I first look at it, it's hard to imagine that Eric Hansen can be inactive. He's hyperactive online, a very prolific streamer. And he just came back from the Olympiad, so I'm sure he's warmed up. Hopefully for him, not burnt out. And I'm sure maybe he's still recovering from jet lag. But there are a few other players coming back from the Olympiad too. Ray Robson, most notably on the U.S. team, having just won the silver medal. And Alexander Lenderman, who was a coach for the U.S. team. So it seems like a few players in this section might have some jet lag to come over.
Do you have a pick in this section right off the bat?
I mean, it's the type of field where anyone can win. I mean, look at the ratings. They're pretty close. Like the biggest differential, if we look at Lenderman and Robson, they're only about 60 points between them. So a field like this, it usually comes down to form, who's in the sharpest shape. I would either have to pick Ray or Jacobson. I know they've been working very hard lately, and they're just outside of the elite group of 3 U.S. players behind the magic 3 of Fabiano, Hikaru, and Wesley. So I know both of them are making a push to at some point get to 2,700.
Right. Yeah, I'd go with Jacobson too. Mm-hmm. He always has really great performances here in St. Louis, and I really don't think, I think he was seeded number 8 there. I don't think that's going to be a really big deal for him in this event.
And don't forget, he was on the verge of winning the Summer Chess Classic,
yes,
but lost in a very exciting Armageddon playoff. So I'm sure he's looking to do better than the last tournament.
He's actually the only returning Classic champion from this series that we've held. So best of luck to all the players, of course, and to Jacobson. Let's take a look at our Challengers section in Group B. 2,500 level players. We have 5 federations represented in this group, and you'll notice there are 8 grandmasters. International Master Brandon Jacobson has just been awarded that title after he earned it. That just came days ago in Batumi. At the FIDE Congress, he was awarded the IM title, and then FIDE Master Christopher Yu. And those two have norms that they can earn in this event.
That's true. Brandon Jacobson, being an IM, has potential for IM norms. And Christopher Yu is an FM. He has potential for both an IM norm or a GM norm. And we should note that I believe Christopher Yu already has 2 IM norms, and he has a 2400 rating. So if he gets his final norm in this event, he can get the International Master title.
Indeed. This could be a big event for him, but it would be very impressive if he wins that. You know, they make you work for those titles, Eric.
Right.
I'm sure you know.
I know myself. Yeah, it can be a challenge. Do you know how many points Christopher needs to get the IM norm?
Christopher Yu needs to earn 4 points to get the last norm. That's
doable. That's a -1 score. He could draw all but one of his games, lose the last game, and still get a norm.
Let's become more familiar with the tournament format. This is a not a double round robin, but the 2 10-player round robins. The time control is 90 minutes for the first 40 moves, and then 30 minutes added on for the remainder of the game after that. There is a 30-second increment from move number 1, which means that all players are required to take notation from the very beginning to the very end. And also, there is a 30-move draw rule in effect. The players cannot agree to a draw until after Black's 30th move. And this is so the players play fighting chess. Tony Rich, the arbiter up in the tournament hall and the executive director here at the club, said, I don't mind draws, but at least play fighting chess, and that's what it's all about.
That's true, yeah. So the games can go quite long with the increment, the no-draw rule, and the added time after move 40.
And let's take a look at the tournament schedule. We're going to be here for 9 days. There are no rest days, so buckle up. 11 a.m. on the first day and the last day. The last day is to make room for playoffs if we need them, because there can only be one winner in each section. Every other day, the rounds begin at 1 p.m. You should follow the games as they happen at uschesschamps.com. Now, you'll notice we're on the air a little bit late, and we will be every day. We have an abbreviated 90-minute show for you that starts with the games in progress and may end with the games in progress if game clinchers are not still in the tournament hall. So we will be on. We were on today at 1:30. We'll be on at the last day at 1:30 Central Time, and then 3:30 Central Time all the other days. So we hope that you can join us. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to everyone watching online from all over the world. We have streams up on both YouTube and Twitch, and we will be taking a glance at the YouTube chat and the Twitch chat, so if people have questions or you just want to say hi, feel free to interact with us there.
Yeah, and be sure to use the hashtag Fall Chess Classic to join the conversation. And right now I can tell you that in our YouTube chat, Piggy Pig Pig said, I love Mike Kummer, my favorite international arbiter. So thank you, Piggy Pig Pig.
It's very kind.
Yes. Now there are games in progress, and actually one game is already finished. Let's take a look at the pairings. In Group A, this is what it's all about. We have Grandmaster Jun Ludwig Hammer. I asked all the players how to say their names. Oh my goodness, this is embarrassing.
It's a challenge.
It is. We have Hammer taking on Grandmaster Chessbra Eric Hansen. Grandmaster Alexei Dreyev taking on Lazaro Brzon. Yuri Kuzubov taking on Alex Lenderman. Varuzhin Akobian versus Ray Robson. And our game of the day in Group A.
That's right. We have Darius Wirtz against Grandmaster Sethuraman, who I believe Sethuraman's first time playing in St. Louis. He arrived just a few days ago, and both of these are incredibly strong players. If we take a look at the current position, they had a somewhat quiet opening with queens getting traded very early on from a Catalan structure. But if we go forward just a few moves here after knight to b5, rook a c8, white planted this knight on a very beautiful square in the heart of black's territory on d6, attacking the rook, attacking the bishop, attacking the b7 pawn. after black played simple rook to c7, white played a very fiery move, knight take b7, and just glancing at this position, it kind of makes my head hurt because there's a lot of things under attack. We can see that the knight is attacked by the rook, but the bishop is staring down along the long diagonal. The rooks are staring at each other on the d-file, and for the last 13 or so minutes, Sweerts has been thinking in this position, perhaps trying to calculate the concrete variations. And unfortunately for me, I'm not able to say what the outcome is going to be. I think there's a lot of different captures to calculate, so we'll definitely want to keep an eye on this game.
Indeed we will. Now, the other section is ongoing as well. Group B, the Challengers Division. Let's take a look at the pairings here. St. Louisan Grandmaster Akshat Chandra taking on Grandmaster Sergei Azarov. Christopher Yu, the FIDE Master, who has a title to earn in this event, taking on the other youngster, Brandon Jacobson, the newly minted IM. And then the rest are all Grandmasters. Elshan Moradiabadi, the former Grandmaster in Res here at the Chess Club, taking on another Grandmaster in Res, Danish Boros of Hungary. Ashwin Jaram takes on Conrad Holt, and then our game of the day in Group B.
Yeah, Steven Zerk against Grandmaster Hovhan Gabuzyan. I think both of these players have contention to win the event. I must say that Steven is my top pick, given that he's performed very well in St. Louis in the past. He's played a number of the Grandmaster Norm Invitationals. I know he's scored norms at these tournaments with very impressive scores, and now he's in a section with some pretty top guns, so we'll see if he can kind of keep up his St. Louis momentum.
Have you seen Gabuzyan before?
I have not. That's a new name for me. I believe he's from Armenia.
That's correct.
Yeah, and
he's the highest rated.
He's the highest rated, and I don't believe he's played in St. Louis before. I think there's a good number of players where this is their first time playing in St. Louis, so there might be some adjustments, just acclimating to the environment and the time zone and just the overall surroundings.
Well, what does the game look like so far in that matchup?
Yeah, if we take a look at the current position, I was pretty impressed with Steven Zerk's opening. It came from one of my favorite openings, the London system, where we see this very kind of traditional London structure. And at this point, I liked Steven's setup, these two bishops glaring down at the queen side, the open c-file for white. If we go forward to see how the game unfolded after rook to c8, queen to b1, knight b4, it seemed like black was playing a bit more actively. And then after bishop take b7, there were quite a number of trades. Rook takes c1, all the rooks got traded, and then knight d3. So black went down a pawn, but is getting a lot of initiative with the knight attacking both the queen and the bishop. After queen to d1, knight take f4, e take f4. If we look at this position and count the pawns, white is up a pawn, but the structure doesn't seem too aesthetic for white. And actually, I would encourage the viewers to pause the board or pause the video here and try and find the simple tactic for black to win back a pawn. If we notice, the queen is defending the pawn on d4, but it is tied down to also defending the e1 square, which is targeted by the black queen. So this is what we call in chess being overworked, where the white queen is simply doing too many jobs at once. After bishop take d4, the queen cannot recapture due to checkmate on e1. So it seems like black won back the pawn after bishop f3, e6, and h4. This brings us to the current position where it's equal material, but it's opposite colored bishops. So sometimes this will create some drawing chances. But I mean, if I had to pick a side, I would have to pick black in this position. We should also look at the time situation. We're under 27.
Well, what, you'd pick black because of the pawns being more coherent and structured?
Yeah, sometimes when you look at pawn structure, you want to look at pawn islands and also like double pawns. In this case, black has a very nice large pawn island extending on the king side, keeping the black king quite safe. These double pawns on f4 for white, combined with this advanced pawn in h4, it's a bit weakening to the king. And we should also note that especially the pawn in f2 can be a long-term target, as it's just kind of stuck on a dark square, and it can be constantly attacked by this bishop on d4. So I wouldn't be surprised if black plays a simple move soon like queen c5 or queen b6, and just tries to further optimize the position and really put the pressure on white, given that Steven only has less than 2 minutes to make 13 more moves.
Yeah, for Gabuzyan, it's a very scenic pawn island indeed. Well, you know, some of these players are professionals, some are students, but none of them are playing for free. And there is more than just pride and glory on the line. Let's take a look at the prize fund for our top group. 22 grand in total on the line. Eric, not too bad.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. It makes me wish that I was playing in this event, but I guess there's a reason why I'm in the commentary room and not in the playing hall.
Someday. Someday. And how about the prize fund for Group B? It's not too shabby as well. Very generous prize fund, with the first place winner going home with $4,000.
That can buy a lot of pumpkins. Well, maybe at the end of this tournament, we'll have to take a trip to the pumpkin patch and stock up for Halloween.
It is Halloween. Yes.
It's true.
It is the season.
Now that you mention it, do you think we might see a Halloween gambit at some point throughout this event? No. It is a dubious opening at the highest
Would you
levels.
play it just for the gimmick?
I would consider it. The Halloween gambit is dubious if you play it as white, but there's a version as black. You can play like a reverse Halloween gambit, which is actually quite playable. Maybe I can show it real quick. Just
Sure,
for the viewers.
let's take a look at the Halloween gambit.
Going back here, ignore the names for the time being, because we don't want anyone to assume that these players are going into such a crazy line. But the Halloween gambit for white is when white sacrifices not a pawn but a piece on e5. Knight take e5 is the start of the Halloween. I think it's called the Halloween gambit because it looks scary. Like, white's pawn center is quite terrifying. And there's many variations where if the knight moves away, then the pawns can keep rolling down the board. And white argues that there's some compensation for having a large pawn center, even though white is down a knight. But then there's a reverse version of the Halloween gambit where if we go back a couple moves here, and let's say white plays pawn to g3, black can basically do the same thing, sacrifice the knight on e4, after knight take e4, d5, and this is actually a better version for black because white does not have this retreating move, knight to g3. The pawn is actually misplaced on g3. So if we were to see a Halloween gambit, I would think it would occur from this line, but I think the odds are quite slim.
Yeah, I would say so. But yeah, it'd be very, very thematic. Okay, so we have one game that has already finished. Jacobson and Robson have battled to a draw in a rook endgame.
Yeah, I know these players have played many times before in U.S. championship events. And in the past, actually, their most recent game was a notorious just marathon game where Rosen tried to claim threefold repetition, didn't end up claiming it correctly. Then Ray was the one who eventually won, checkmating with a bishop and knight. This game seemed a lot more calm. Seemed like they went into a pretty theoretical Grunfeld line where everything just traded off and we're left with a almost symmetrical, just king pawn or rook pawn ending, just a dead draw.
Okay, so as we look through the games here, has anything caught your eye, Eric? I'm always looking at my little thermometer here on my own computer to see if there is one game that's really just sticking out.
I mean, the game between the two youngsters seems very, very sharp, very dynamic.
It is funny they're playing together on this first day here.
Yeah, we have a couple interesting matchups. I mean, the two youngest players in Group B are facing off between Christopher Yu and Brandon Jacobson. And then later we should take a look at the game in Group A between Hammer and Hansen, because they're both from the cold climate areas and they're both prolific streamers. So it seems like some of the matchups that these opponents have a lot in common. If we take a look at the position here, I do want to go back and see the opening. It did come from one of the sharpest lines in the Najdorf, where white castles queenside, and it seemed like black just left the king in the center for most of the game. After bishop take f6, pawn take f6, these center pawns do act as a good, somewhat shelter for the black king. Going forward here, it's white's intention to destroy the pawn shelter, going for this f5 move, which is a double-edged move because it aims to destabilize the pawn in e6, but at the same time it gives away this seemingly valuable e5 square. And we can imagine that quite soon the knight will jump into e5 and be a very stable outpost in the center. Going forward here, pawn h5, bishop d3, queen b6. White played king b1, which is a favorite rule of Ben Feingold. Famous saying is always play king b1. Makes a lot of sense in this position to get off any potential x-ray vision on the c-file and make sure the king is just well guarded for if there's scenarios where the position opens up even further. And it seemed like black is the one seizing the initiative first with pawn b4, knight e2, and a5. Just keep the pawn storm coming. Ideas of a4, perhaps kicking the knight, maybe even future possibilities of b3 to bust open the queen side. Queen e1 was played, a4 did come, knight d2. So it seems like white is getting pushed back. Like we can see the knight retreats, the queen retreated. So I am impressed with the way that Jacobson is playing in this position. Knight e5, another forward attacking move. And now it's time for Christopher to perhaps try and regroup and optimize the pieces. Knight f3 played, and seems like Brandon wasted no time going for the immediate pawn b3, which is not even a sacrifice. Like sometimes when a pawn break like this is played, it's aiming to sacrifice a pawn to open up some file, but in this case, this pawn on b3 is supported by both the pawn on a4 and the queen, and it seems like some file is guaranteed to open up after c take b3, a take b3. I do like the move that Christopher, you played in this position, pawn a3. Whenever you're the one defending, you want to try and keep the position as closed as possible. Pawn a3 keeps the a and b file relatively closed for the time being, but it seems like this pawn on b3 is going to be somewhat of a long-term headache for white, as it's not the easiest pawn to remove. And after rook g8, knight g3, this brings us to the current position. They're only on move 22, and okay, we see that Jacobson just played another move there. Can't quite make out what it is, but it seems like both players are running low on time, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a time scramble to come with 18 more moves to play until time control.
Yeah, they're playing pretty rapidly. Oh, look there, we're getting a little bit of a closer look at the board.
Oh wow. Okay, stuff happened. After rook g8, knight g3, seems like Jacobson went for the trade of knight for bishop, taking on d3, rook take d3, and then his rook swoops down into c2. I'm sure this was planned ahead of time. The intention was to remove the bishop from defending c2, and now the rook is a very annoying piece on c2, controlling the second rank, supported by the pawn on b3. And okay, speaking of Halloween earlier, this seems quite terrifying for the white side with this combination of b3 pawn and rook on c2. So I'm not sure what white's going to do here.
How does Brandon, is Brandon going to just bring in more on the c file, the queen and the rook?
I mean, that's the thing, that like the rook alone can't carry through the whole attack. Like the black is going to need more attackers, and I'm not entirely sure what the immediate follow-up will be. I mean, it might just be that he wants to take on g2, maybe not immediately attack the white king, but just win a pawn. And it's up to white to perhaps deal with this threat. We might see a move like rook g1 or queen f1. Feels a little bit passive. These are types of positions I don't like to play myself because they're so double-edged. And it's always a question, do you hold on to material or do you go for counterplay? Another move that white might be considering here is something like knight d4, just to centralize a knight, put pressure on the e6 pawn, but also attack both the rook and the b3 pawn. And this actually looks like a pretty reasonable move to consider. We can imagine things could get a bit messy if the rook takes on g2. This rook might be going a bit too far into white's territory. There might be some idea like queen f1 to trap the rook. I should note that I'm not using an engine myself, so these types of lines the computer can crunch through and find perhaps the exact and best continuation. But for a mere human to figure everything out, especially with the time ticking, it's not so easy. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's mistakes or more fireworks to come.
And also, to remind all of you out there, if you're watching on YouTube exclusively, you can also check out the YouTube stream that's embedded at uschesschamps.com, where we have the Chess24 module up there, and you can turn on the engine thermometer, or you can turn it off if it's not your thing. So follow along with us there at uschesschamps.com.
That's true. Some people like to watch chess with the engine always running. Some people don't like any engine interference. Keep it fresh. And also avoid the laziness of just seeing the top engine move and just assuming the valuation is always correct. When I watch chess, I like to first look at the game without an engine, and then after I come to my own conclusion, sometimes I'll turn the engine on, but it can vary.
Right. Okay, well, let's take a look at the game between the two streamers.
Yeah, let's do it.
The Hammer and the Chess Bra.
Sure, these are two fan favorites. I'm scrolling here to find the game. We can see them in the playing hall there, playing right beside the window. Both of them are a bit silhouetted.
They have the best spot in that tournament hall, I'm telling you what. It's kind of dark up there because they have some of the window blinds closed. I don't know if that's a request of the players on the left side of the screen. There's some windows that are closed, but I'd like to play in a nice bright spot.
That's true. Like sometimes the lighting can be quite harsh, especially if it's a sunny day. It was actually raining earlier, and it was cloudy, so you would think the light is a bit more diffused and there'd be more soft light.
Beautiful day here in St. Louis outside. I mean, just not too sunny and not too overcast. It's just great.
I mean, apart from the rain, this is what we want, just something cool. Nothing like that 90-degree weather in August. So, yeah, let's take a look at the game. We can see a very imbalanced position. Perhaps we could start with the opening, because they did play a variation of the Najdorf. I know Hansen is known for playing the Najdorf, and Hammer plays a somewhat sneaky move g3, not one of the main lines, but still a very playable line. And after pawn e5, I believe the main move here for white is knight de2, usually to keep this diagonal more open for the bishop coming to g2, also having ideas of knight to d5 followed by knight ec3. But Hammer played a very peculiar move here, knight f3, which I'll admit I've never seen before. It seems like a strange square for the knight, because the knight is a bit dominated by this pawn structure with e5, d6. I don't see the clear future for the knight right away. The knight also blocks the bishop's diagonal. It also blocks the f-pawn from moving. So we'll have to see how the game unfolded. Maybe one thing I could anticipate is that if Hammer would like to reposition his knight, maybe a potential idea is knight d2, knight c4, knight e3 to control the d5 square. But let's see what happens after bishop to e7, bishop g2. Okay, so both sides complete development. And then Hammer goes straight away for knight d5, very common move in these types of positions. And then after bishop b7, another somewhat strange move from white. This knight looks like one of the best pieces in the position, but Hammer went ahead and traded it off for one of black's ugliest pieces in this position, the bishop on e7, which literally has no moves, and he trades it off for a very centralized knight. I think he did this because there is simply too much pressure on d5, the fact that there is already two attackers, and also the fact that even though it seems like maybe not the best trade in the current moment, if you can win the bishop pair, it can be very beneficial in the long term, given that if the position opens up further and white has the only dark squared bishop on the board, the c1 bishop can come to life later on in the game. So let's go forward here. Knight take e7, queen take e7, and now we see the idea of the knight heading to h4. Seems like perhaps a future possibility of knight f5, or as I'm sure you would know, what would Ben Feingold say here?
Knight f5.
Knight f5.
But he attributes it to someone else as well.
Does he?
Yes.
Who was the first creator of that saying?
I wish I could remember. Tell us in the YouTube chat. Where does knight f5 come from? He says it in every video. This is shameful. I'm sorry.
Ben Feingold even has a Twitch emote of knight f5, so I just assumed it was Ben who created that, but I could be wrong.
The director, Danny Machuca, says it's Cotronius. Vasilius Cotronius, I believe, yes.
Ooh, the Greek GM.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Now he thinks.
Oh,
it could be.
So we need confirmation on that. Anyway, knight f5 or knight f5 is a tremendous threat in this position to target the black queen and also target this backward pawn on d6. So queen e6 is played, and white improves. Like white has to perhaps still babysit this e4 pawn, knight bd7. Let's zoom forward here because many more moves have been played, both sides trying to optimize their position. It was not my intention to bring up Ben Feingold so much, but he has another famous saying, which I'm sure you're very familiar with.
He has a lot of famous sayings.
The never play f3. In this case, f3 actually looks very ugly, but maybe it was necessary because black had 3 attackers on the e4 pawn. And the problem for white is this queen is leading the battery. Usually when you have a battery, when pieces are lined up, you don't want your most powerful piece leading the battery. And in this case, black was threatening knight take e4, so maybe that's what provoked pawn f3, seemingly ugly move, but perhaps necessary in the position. Going forward here, f3, then d5. I actually really like the play by Eric Hansen. I think even though white has a bishop pair, it's Hansen who's really taking the initiative and carrying the momentum in his favor. I really like the harmony with all of his pieces. It seems like everything is working together incredibly well. The main focus, of course, being the pawn in e4. Now there's 4 attackers on e4, and Hammer was provoked to take on d5, bishop take d5. Let's go forward even further here. White did attempt to try and consolidate and unwind a little bit. Rook ac1, a5. And now we see perhaps the first actually active move from Hammer, bishop to h3. A nice little sneaky idea, the benefit of having the queen on f1, given that the bishop is defended. And this seems like a nice skewer from white. There's many pieces lined up along this diagonal. White's not winning anything, but at least he's fighting for control of some squares in black's territory. And I can imagine that knight f5 could come relatively soon. Queen c6 was played, and then, okay, things seem to open up even more after pawn c4, a very explosive move, b takes c4, b takes c4, bishop takes c4. If I'm counting correctly, black just won a pawn in that variation, but has walked into a pin. So let's see how the game unfolds. Queen f2, queen a6, knight f5, rook c6 takes us to the final position. They're on move 26. They have 14 more moves to reach move 40 and gain that extra half hour. It is Hammer to move, and I am trying to evaluate this position. It seems like white has a little bit of compensation for being down a pawn, but I don't think it's that much, and I still really like the way that Hansen has been playing in this game. I mean, his pieces still seem very coordinated. I like the queen and bishop battery kind of piercing through white's territory, and everything seems to be defending everything. There's not a single piece in this position that's undefended for black. The knights defend each other, the rook defends e5, this rook defends everything, the queen defends the a-pawn. So it's not clear what white will be targeting with the moves to come.
You know, the lifetime score between these players, they're no strangers to each other in this particular match. We have Hammer getting the better of Hansen at 9 games to 7. I'm sorry, 11 games to 9 with 7 draws. So very familiar they should be with each other, these players.
It's true, and I'm sure the lifetime score you're referring to does not take into account, I'm sure, the several, if not like hundreds of games that they've played on chess.com.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them are very active streamers, and I know they play in all the chess.com streamer tournaments. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've played hundreds of games on chess.com. It would be interesting to see that statistic. I don't know if we can see like the lifetime score against 2 chess.com users, but maybe we can get the people in the back to look up some stats for us.
Yeah, maybe we could. So we have an update here in the top seed Gabuzyan's game in Group B. It looks like he is, Hovhan Gabuzyan of Armenia is doing very well against Steven Zirk.
Yeah, I liked his position earlier, and it seems like he's been growing his advantage. And with Steven so low on time, I mean, he's still struggling to stay above a minute. And I mentioned earlier that sometimes opposite color bishops have the tendency to be a bit drawish. But in a position like this, the opposite color bishops favor the side who's attacking. It favors the side whose king is more safe. And in this case, white's king is very unsafe on h3. It's begging for shelter, and meanwhile, white seems completely tied down. I mean, the queen on f3 is tied down to 2 different mating ideas. If the queen were to vanish from f3, there'd be potential for black to play either queen take g3 mate or queen h1 mate. So this queen needs to stay on f3. And as black here, I would be looking for some way to just keep applying the pressure and try and perhaps distract the queen away from defending.
I'm being told that Gabuzyan just played h4.
h4, yeah, we see that on the board. And Steven's time is ticking. h4 looks like a very nice move. And Gabuzyan gets away from the board with Steven below a minute. And we can see Steven, hand on his face, not looking so comfortable. He has less than 30 seconds left, it seems like. I mean, the immediate threat is simply to take on g3, either with the pawn or with the bishop. I am a bit curious what Gabuzyan's idea is if white takes back, g take h4. I see that was not played. Do you catch the move here?
He play f5?
Pawn
Queen
f5.
g4, queen g4.
Queen g4 check,
right.
okay. It's not a bad move to try and gain some time. Sometimes when you can play a check and you're so low on time, you might as well do so to gain some the extra 30 seconds on the clock. Now black is needing to get out of check here, but it seems like the king can find a safe place on f8. I'm a bit surprised Gabuzyan walked away from the board, given that he should be playing quickly to put the pressure back on Steven. I wouldn't be surprised if king f8 is played rather quickly here. And then it's still going to be a question how white deals with so much pressure against this g3 pawn. I mean, there are 3 attackers. If king f8 is played and g take h4 is played, maybe I can give this to you as a puzzle. Black to move and checkmate in 1 move.
Well, queen h1.
Yeah, queen h1, and game would be over. So the pawn can't take on h4. I would be interested if queen take h4. It looks like queen h1 can still be played, and then the king is beginning a journey up the board. Pawn f5 could be played, but then king h5, and maybe the white king is actually finding safety in black's territory. Very strange position. Going back here, we see Gabuzyan is not playing king f8 right away. He is taking his time. I mean, there's only 3 legal moves here to consider. There's king f8, there's king h7, which I don't think he wants to play at all. Like, whenever there's opposite color bishops, you don't want to put your king on the color square of the opponent's bishop, given that bishop d3 would be an additional check. So I would imagine he's deciding between king f8 and king h8. I'm trying to figure out if there's a benefit to having the king on h8 rather than f8, but it just seems, wow, he plays king h7. It's a move I least expected. Seems quite strange. I'm trying to figure out, why would he put his king on the light square? Maybe bishop d3 check isn't so venomous because f5 could be played. And maybe he wants to keep his king on h7 to defend the h-pawn in some situations. But the pressure is clearly back on Stephen. He takes the h-pawn with his queen. So we are going to enter a similar line. And after queen h1, king to g4 play is coming pretty rapidly. Now queen e4, not a check, but it seems like a very powerful improving move. Hitting the bishop and improving the queen. And there's some funny mating ideas here. If the bishop moves to a normal square like f3, then it would be an immediate game over, as queen f5 is a pretty aesthetic checkmate. Seems like white's pieces are trying to shelter the king, but they're actually getting in the way, as the king is just completely boxed out, and the black queen controls all the squares around the white king. So Stephen has to make a decision here. His bishop's attacked. Where to move the bishop? Doesn't seem like there's any counterplay. And it seems like there's only a few safe squares for the bishop. Maybe it can retreat to d1 or f1. It could lunge forward to b5 or a6, but then it would be very out of play. And I do want to mention here that black has a couple ways to potentially win this position. Of course, one way is to get some sort of mating attack, given that there's already a fairly nice mating net around the white king. But on top of that, black has the only passed pawn on the board, this d5 pawn. And for the time being, there's nothing immediately in its way. The pawn can start running, and then it's up to white to deal with the pawn running down the board and to deal with the fact that the king is just so unsafe on g4. So I would be quite scared here as white in this position.
So Stephen just played bishop d1 and made the time control. So now there's 30 minutes added on to his clock, as you see. But how long do you think he's going to
survive?
Yeah.
Well, it's a miracle that he made time control and seemingly survived the danger, given that, okay, the king's on g4, and it doesn't seem like there's any immediate win for black. But if we take a look at the last move played, queen d3, so it's another simple attacking move. And even though they made time control, Gabuzyan just played this quite quickly. And now look at this bishop on d1. I mean, bishops are usually pieces that have a lot of mobility, but in this position, the bishop is just so misplaced. It's attacked by the queen. It's essentially trapped. I don't see where the bishop can move. It can't move to c2. It can't move to e2. The worst square possible would be bishop f3, just to reiterate that queen f5 is mate. Yeah. So question is, how does white save the bishop? I only see one move in this position to defend the bishop, which is queen h1. But that looks quite sad, given the queen on h1, the bishop on d1, and the king being the most active piece on g4. Usually you want it the other way around, where the king is safe on the back rank and the more major pieces are active. If we calculate concretely here, it seems like black should have, calculating some forced win actually, it looks like forced win of a queen if black plays queen f5. The king would have two legal moves. If king f3, there'd be queen e4, winning the queen.
And they just shook.
Ooh, Stephen just resigned.
Yeah, the game is over.
Yeah, because if king h4, there is a very sneaky move, queen take f4, and black is taking advantage of this pawn being pinned from behind by the bishop on f2, and white's just getting mated, or I mean, if king h5, there's queen g5. If king h3, there's queen g3 mates. When I teach younger kids, I like to call this mate the in-your-face mate. The queen is just in the king's face.
Yeah.
Now, I don't encourage kids to say in your face when they play this checkmate, but one of the most classic mates in chess. And one of my favorite picks for the tournament, Steven Zerk, going down quite brutally in the first round.
We should probably get the top seed of Group B, Hovhan Gabuzyan, in here. What do you think?
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I see they're both have left the playing hall. The board is now empty there. Is that our first decisive game?
Yes, first blood of the tournament in either field.
The two groups.
And by the way, if you're just now joining us, this is the 2018 Fall Chess Classic. My name is Ben Simon, and I'm joined by international master and notable chess streamer Eric Rosen. And we're happy that you're here with us for day one, round one of this very strong two-round robin event. Okay, so we've just had one game finish. Let's see. We have Group A. You know who the most stylish person in this event is, don't you?
Wait, I'm trying to think. Gureyev isn't playing.
No.
Gureyev, it's not Gureyev.
The hat.
Ah,
Did you see the hat?
Wait, what do we call it? I'm blanking. The
fedora.
The fedora,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
the favorite hat of the
Abadi.
Reddit community. Yeah, let's take a look at his game. He's
playing.
now, I should note, he also just came back from the Olympiad.
Yes.
I didn't know this until a few days ago, but he was coaching, now I'm blanking again, he was coaching a team from some country, some smaller country. He was also helping his fiancée and former U.S. Women's Champion, Sabina Feuser, for the U.S. Women's team. So maybe he still has some jet lag to come over, too.
Well, some of these players haven't been feeling well. There's jet lag, and there's also like coughs going around. I know there's several people, even here at the club. So, you got to do your best during these events to kind of stay chipper.
Well, it's good that they're quarantined in the playing hall, and we're safe in the commentary room.
Yes.
We have to just make sure that we don't let any of the sick ones into the studio, but. Yeah, sometimes this happens with the change of weather, and if I'm going to get sick during a tournament, I would prefer to get sick before a tournament, so I'm not getting sick during or towards the end of the tournament, because these events can be quite long and exhausting. I do want to take a look at this game between Danish and Elshan. Let's go back here and see how it unfolded. They did come from a Catalan structure. I do want to note that the Catalan has been a recurring opening this round, trademarked by this bishop on g2, white having a nice space advantage. And if we go forward and see how the game unfolded, white just kept the space advantage, it seemed like, for most of the game, advancing with pawn e5, which is a somewhat double-edged move. When the pawn attacks the knight, white is gaining more space, but it does give away this nice outpost square on d5, which Boros is happy to take. Going forward here, knight take d5, removing the outpost and transforming the pawn structure, queen e2, a5, and bishop to f1, perhaps realizing the bishop wasn't too useful on g2, and going for the attack against the b-pawn. Now, we will get to this game later, but I do want to go back to the game that just finished between Steven Zerk and Hovhan Gabuzyan. We are joined by Hovhan in the studio. Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah.
So welcome to St. Louis, and congratulations for winning your first game. I do want to ask, is this your first time playing at the St. Louis Chess Club?
Oh, yeah.
And where do you live?
Right now I'm studying in Texas, in University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. It's in Brownsville.
Ah, very nice. Is this your first year studying there?
Oh, yeah, I'm a freshman.
Okay. Well, how's the year been going so far? Are you busy with academics? Are you able to balance the chess
Well, I have
and
enough
academics?
time to play chess, to study, to make my classes. Sometimes I have some trouble either to decide to play some tournaments or to concentrate on my exams, but time is enough. So.
I understand that. Yeah, I'm a recent graduate from Western University. I can very much relate to balancing chess and academics.
It's possible.
And,
With good time management, it's easy.
It's all about time management and discipline, too. So I do want to have you take us through the game, and it seemed like you had just a really nice position resulting from this queen and bishop ending. Now, I want to ask, was the London opening a line that you were expecting?
My opponent was playing either e4 or d4 and bishop f4 on any moves. I was prepared like more or less, and I chose this variation. I want to talk about move after 7th black's move. Like
on move 7?
After cd, queen b6. And here about b3 move. Like, it's not a huge positional mistake, but it gives some weak squares on queen side. So position should be more or less equal, because like both sides are developed normally, but b3 pawn like gives me some squares, sometimes on c3, sometimes on a3, maybe queen b4. Usually in these structures, white prefer to put pawn on a3 and have knight on c3. So, well, it's not a huge mistake, but later my counterplay was mostly dependent on these weak squares.
So let me ask you, what was alternative to b3?
Well, I'm thinking about even some pawn sacrifice, maybe like some knight d2, like queen b2, knight c4. And now it's not that easy to play. After queen b4, for example, knight fd2. So I was thinking about queen b5 immediately. To be honest, I'm not sure about this position, about its evaluation, because, well, I was thinking if he plays knight bd2, maybe I will play d5. Not now, before. Because when your knight is developed on d2, it's already useful to have pawn on d5. It's like taking knight squares. Maybe some other possibility was to play queen d2 and after knight e4 to play queen c2.
Seems like a position that you would rather prepare ahead of time.
I'm playing like this position with white, opposite colors. I'm having usually one more tempo, but it's not something huge. It's like sometimes a little advantage, sometimes slightly better for. So it should be equal. I'm not sure about the correct reaction after queen b6, but to be honest, I don't like b3.
Yeah, it did seem a bit weakening, and it seemed like later in the game.
Yeah, maybe it's not a huge mistake, but it gives me some easy play after in many variations, like weakening c3 squares. And
well, let's go forward to the middle game, because when we glanced at this position earlier,
here maybe instead of bishop f5, I was thinking about some e5 move. It's because already weakened this diagonal a1 h8. So, I was worried mostly of some like bishop g5, maybe not taking on e5. Because if
what happens if white takes on e5?
takes knight e5, rook d8. Here, I believe queen c1 or queen e1, because queen c2, bishop f5 is a tempo. And here it's maybe even knight d5. There is some interesting position like knight d5, knight d5 takes. How it was? I forgot some calculations.
It seems like there's a lot of potential for.
Yeah, I'm not sure how is the evaluation of this position, but I thought maybe I'm okay, but I because there was other option for white on e5 to play some bishop g5.
Bishop g5.
Yeah. But because it was of the b3 move, I just preferred to play normally with bishop f5, and I thought if in other positions I'm normal, so with b3 maybe it's even a little better for me. So rook c1, I played rook fc8 because I wanted to have my queen on d8. It can be hanging on b6 sometimes.
I see.
Yeah. Bishop d3. This move was against e4 because now white was threatening to play e4 and bishop e3. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it seems a bit unusual to put the bishop so deep in white's territory and then eventually just give away the bishop pair, where when we were taking a look earlier, I preferred white with these two bishops, but maybe I misevaluated the position.
Yeah, the problem is like white don't have space for a king. Pawn is not an h3. How it usually happens in these positions after like bishop f4, white usually plays some h3.
Right.
So and here like h2 a2 pawn is hanging. So I was dependent on my calculations because you are right. If white have some time to play like h3 or rook c1, it will be a little better for white. That's why I played here queen a5. Otherwise, for example, if position was normal, white don't have these problems. I would play d5, e6, and try to hold the position.
I see. Yeah, it seemed like you made use of kind of the temporary advantage.
Yeah,
where white
I
was a
thought that
bit
I had
out
some
of place.
tempos after queen f5. That's why I played. And well, here I think that was the one of the main mistakes for white to get bad position, because here he gave me the c file, and the options was maybe instead of rook c1 to play other rook to c1.
Yeah, I thought it was a possibility for black to sacrifice.
I cannot take
the
on
a-pawn.
a2 because he can play rook 3 c2 and later d5.
So queen a5, d5.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
so that's why I have to play firstly e5 instead of taking on a2.
Mhm.
And now bishop g3, and for example queen a2. No, it's plus
Queen a2.
Queen a2. Yeah, queen a2. But here I saw some abilities like bishop d5 or even bishop c6. I'm not sure about the position, but it's not a huge advantage. So I decided to play. Maybe that was the better option for white. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he played a bit too passively.
Yeah,
in the
if
game.
now he gave me the
Rook
c file
c1.
and rook c7 maybe was a good move. Now I have the c file, so it's of course it's not winning, but it's and especially at this moment my opponent started to have some time trouble, so that was easier for me to play.
Yeah, it seemed like a combination of factors. Just you had this kind of slight pull in the position.
Yeah, it's not
combined
easy
with the
to
time
play
situation.
these type positions with time trouble. And bishop e7 was a great mistake already. I'm not sure about the options. Maybe it was better to play bishop g3 and try to hold position.
Just hunker down.
Yeah, because now after bishop b7, how it happened, takes, and knight d3, it's already a very unpleasant position.
Yeah, I was thinking if queens got traded, there'd be some hope for a draw.
Yeah, of course, but I'm never going to trade the queens.
Of course, you're always
Sure,
the one creating some attack. And it seemed like relatively smooth conversion. I mean, he was quite low on time already by this point. And
yeah. And here already, I believe bishop e4 is also a mistake. I was thinking about some. Well, it's maybe more solid was to play some g3, or is it possible?
G3. Just try and make sure everything's held together.
Oh yeah, I think g3 was better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because later on it just seemed like.
Because after bishop e4, there was a nice move. I found it, and bishop c5. Now I'm threatening to play queen g3. And at some point, as it happened, like he played king f1 and queen b4. Now f4 is hanging, so he have to take his queen from d1 square. And he gave me d2 is super important square, because now like I am controlling like everything and attacking f2 pawn. Also, bishop on e4 has no squares now.
Yeah, it seemed like very instructive.
Yeah,
play.
after this I was sure that I'm gonna win, because especially in time. I'm not sure if it's possible to hold this position, but my opponent was in time trouble, so I was
from
quite happy.
a practical standpoint, I mean, it's just so many headaches for white to deal with.
d3 and d5 and
If we go forward here, and it seems like the finish was pretty nice for you.
Here h4, if it takes on I prefer to play h4, because for example, if to play f5, there was an option to play instead of h4. No, what was there was queen g2 move, and it's not so easy already, because now he's trading the queens, or if queen e1 bishop h5. I mean, it can be winning also, but not as simple as after h4. Now if takes, I can take bishop h4. So yeah, and that's king h7 was an important move here.
I was a bit surprised you put your king on the light square, but
because as he plays bishop d3 check, now king h8, and after in variation like queen h4, queen h1, queen d1, and d3 will be hanging.
So after this,
yeah. So if now queen h4,
queen
h1, queen d1, and that was the point.
That's a nice little trick. This bishop is just loose on d3. So he played. Yeah, his king was forced to d4.
I needed to
and
have
then
my king
ugly.
on h7, because let's imagine I played king h8 or some other move, he could have like queen f6 check here. I'm not sure, maybe that's also good that I can play king g8, but I decided, I thought it's winning, and bishop d1, queen d3. That's over.
That was a very beautiful finish. Like the bishop's just so passive on d1. So congratulations on a very nice start. What was your preparation going into this event? I know pairings went up well before today. Have you prepared for each player? Are you going to take it one game at a time?
Before the tournament, I took a short look about my opponent's openings, but I don't like to prepare before because I have a lot of time here. I have nothing to do during the day, so.
That's true.
And when you're preparing like before the round, it's easier to memorize your preparation.
That's very true. And last question, have you had a chance, or will you have the chance to do anything non-chess related and perhaps a bit more fun in St. Louis during these next several days?
I hope so. Well, I'm not planning to sit all day in my room and just chess.
Good plan.
Don't have info what to do right now, but I will ask my friends who have been here and some activities.
Well, sounds good. Well, congrats again on the start. And we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with more coverage from the 2018 Fall Chess Classic.
Welcome to the chess capital of the United States. The St. Louis Chess Campus, in the heart of the vibrant Central West End, has established itself as a premier global destination for chess and is comprised of two unique nonprofit institutions. The Chess Club and Scholastic Center of St. Louis is recognized as the top chess facility in the world and plays host to all major tournaments, including the U.S. Chess Championships and the Sinkfield Cup, one of the strongest chess tournaments globally. Tournaments are broadcast online to more than 150 countries, led by an expert commentary team of grandmasters. The Chess Club is an educational organization committed to promoting the game of chess, with a specific focus on bringing the benefits of chess to children throughout the St. Louis area. Research shows children who play chess exhibit improved analytical skills and increased confidence. The Chess Club is highly engaged with the local community, bringing scholastic chess programs to more than 100 schools, providing hundreds of classes each week. Directly across the street from the Chess Club is the World Chess Hall of Fame. This one-of-a-kind cultural institution invites visitors to experience chess in imaginative ways and is home to the U.S. and World Chess Halls of Fame. Cutting-edge exhibitions feature rare, historic chess artifacts paired with world-class art. Innovative programming explores the intersection of chess, art, and culture. Visitors can enjoy interactive programs designed around the exhibitions and monthly music in the galleries. The World Chess Hall of Fame is nothing you expect and everything you love. 3 different galleries and a premier gift shop highlight the culture, history, and creativity behind the game. Come visit, play chess, leave enriched. To learn more about the St. Louis Chess Campus, visit stlchesscampus.org. Be surprised.
Hello and welcome back to the 2018 Fall Chess Classic right here in St. Louis, Missouri. My name is Ben Simon, along with international master and notable streamer Eric Rosen. Eric, we have a game in Group B that is on the verge of being clinched by one of the youngsters.
It's true. The heated matchup between Christopher Yu and Brandon Jacobson. Things were sharp earlier, and now it seems like some pieces have come off the board in Jacobson's favor. Let's take a look at the current position, and I just want to take a quick pause here to count material and see that Black has an extra minor piece, and White only has a pawn for it. And Black also has a bishop pair, so it seems like Brandon should be cruising to victory, assuming there's no sneaky tricks from the White side. I do want to go back and see how the game unfolded. Going to the moment when Black played Rook C2, we were admiring this very beautiful combination of pawn and rook in White's territory. And let's get to the moment where Black won material. Seems like White was just quite passive. Queen b5, just kind of a poking move, attacking the rook, which is loose on d3, queen e3, and then nice centralizing move, queen to e5, and just seems like White is holding on for dear life. Rook d4 was played, queen goes back to c5, some nice alignment here with the queen aligned on the same diagonal with all of White's major pieces. This rook is a bit pinned on d4, so White cannot immediately take the bishop on a4. Queen d3 played, unpinning the rook from the queen, but there's still a pin to the rook on g1. After bishop to b5, I think this is a moment where things start getting messy. After queen take b3, rook take d2. Nice tactic from black, taking advantage of the pin. Maybe this was overlooked by white, but we can see that there's just so much pressure. The combination of bishop, queen, and rook targeting so many loose things in white's position.
Would queen e3 have helped?
Queen e3 looks like an attempt to keep everything defended. Seems like there could be maybe one more straw that can break the camel's back in this position with a move like pawn e5, and now the pin just seems too devastating. And with this queen well defended on c5, rook d3 would just run into bishop take d3. So I assume this is what Christopher was scared of. So he did take on b3, going down a piece, trying to get as much compensation as possible. But okay, black takes on g1, keeps the initiative. Queen returns to c5. And I wouldn't be surprised if this game ends relatively shortly. It is Brandon's move, though, and they're both in time trouble. They're still behind move 40. They're on move 33. 7 more moves to go until time pressure. Christopher kind of shifting around in his chair there, playing with both a couple of pieces off the board. That's a bit mesmerizing to look at.
Is this a psychological tactic here, or is this just nerves?
I mean, if I was sitting across from him, I would be so mesmerized on the pieces twirling in his hands.
Smart kid.
Maybe trying to hypnotize his opponents. But Brandon does play a move. Actually, a few moves have been played. King d7 was played at some point. Oh, a lot of moves have been played. Rook to c2. Ooh, the knight came to f5. Another instance of knight f5. Let's get to the current position, because it seems like white's getting a bit activity, but probably not enough. I mean, white's still down a piece, the rooks are off the board. Christopher just played knight d4. Oh, my apologies. More moves have been played. Let's update the position. Knight d4, bishop c6, knight takes c6, king takes c6, and black is just up a full bishop. I think at this point it's just hoping for a miracle from the white side, given that this should be a relatively easy conversion for black. But Christopher's making the most of it. Queen b8, jumping into the territory of the black side, hitting the bishop. And I think white's hope is the fact that this bishop is out of play, and the king is very exposed on c6. And we saw this in the Steven Zerk Gabuzyan game too. When a king is exposed and there's still a queen on the board, you have to be very careful of an onslaught of checks. In this case, black will maybe have to work to get out of some potential perpetual, with the queen planning to come perhaps to c8, to a8. There's lots of potential checking ideas. And it would be a blunder if black moves the bishop to e7, given that queen e8 is just a simple fork. So it looks like they finally have reached move 40. Let me update the board again and see where they're at. Going back
It looks
to
like they're almost there.
queen
39.
b8, bishop h6. Looks like this is the current position. 39th move. Both players hovering around a minute. I wouldn't be surprised if once they reach time control, white would resign pretty shortly. But who knows? We can never assume that the youngsters are not going to give up without a fight, especially Christopher Yu. Sure has a lot of energy to keep fighting, especially in round 1. We see queen c8 was played, and king b6 played quite quickly. And now it's a question, can black escape the checks from the white queen? We see Brandon there leaving the board. Christopher still appears to be a bit nervous, but both players have the extra half hour to ponder the situation. It might be interesting to analyze here, like what exactly happens after queen b8. Because it seems like if the king wants to escape the perpetual, I mean, a6 or c6 would just repeat the position. So maybe the king would be provoked up to c5. And if white continues with a move like b4, it's a bit funny, but black king can probably find shelter in white's territory. If b4 isn't played, maybe queen b4, but then simply king c6, and maybe the king can start running this direction, like queen c4, king d7. Seems like white is going to, at some point, run out of checks. Just imagining some line where the king is probably going to find safety on g6.
Well, another player with white that is in really big trouble right now is Hammer. If that game isn't over already, Eric Hansen in Group A is looking really good. He's got a queen and a rook on his 7th rank, and
this looks very pleasing for black.
Right. I guess the game is still in progress.
Yeah, and there we see the shot of the players.
There we are.
Eric, still very focused, and they have reached time control. They just reached move 40. This is a time of the round where players will be reaching the 40 move mark, gaining extra time, and then having a lot more time to ponder these various endgame positions. But I very much like Eric's setup, given that, I mean, when you have two major pieces on the 2nd rank, especially with the queen still on the board, there's going to be some potential mating ideas. For the time being, white does have all the squares in front of the king defended. The rook defends f2, the knight defends g2, the queen defends h2. But what this also means is all of white's pieces are tied down. None of the pieces have much mobility, given that there's so many potential threats on the 2nd rank. And if black can just remove one of these pieces, the knight, the rook, or the queen, it could be lights out for Hammer. So as black, I would be looking here for some way to use this knight as a more aggressive attacking piece.
I thought originally knight f3, because if the queen takes, then you can mate on h2, but the rook would have to take.
Knight f3, rook take f3, right?
Yeah, okay.
And it's white's move, and Hammer does not look so pleased. Hansen has left the board, and just Hammer with his head in his hand can't be too happy about this position. Doesn't seem like there's any active play. White would like to generate some counterplay, but f7's defended. This knight is defended on e5 by the queen. And a move like knight f5, which we've seen already a few times in this round, notable attacking move, just doesn't work because queen g2 mates. So I wouldn't be happy if I was in white's situation here.
So we can expect. I mean, do you think Hammer is going to resign here soon?
I mean, it's equal material, and assuming that there's no immediate tactical blow, I would think he's going to try and fight on. I mean, his one hope is that if queens get traded, then maybe there's some drawing chances. The problem is there's no way to force a queen trade. And I'm actually trying to find a move here for white that doesn't lose immediately. I didn't even think of this before, but it might, I mean, there might be some Zugzwang potential here, given that so many things are tied down. I mean, this knight has no moves. Knight moves anywhere, there's queen g2 mates. The rook, on the other hand, it can't move to f2. It can't really move along the 1st rank because queen f2. And moving along the f-file doesn't seem to be of any purpose.
There's no progress to make here, right? I mean, white would just be shuffling, finding the best shuffle.
White might have to shuffle queen or king h1 maybe, but that looks like such a sad move. And meanwhile, it's going to be all up to black to figure out the way just to crash through. So we see Hammer not even looking at the board, just his head off to the side, maybe glancing at some other games, doesn't want to look at the position in front of him. I've been in this situation before many times myself, and sometimes you can't undo the past. There's no time machine to go back several moves earlier. so just has to move forward, maybe realize his mistakes and move on.
I'm curious, we just saw Hammer looking at the board next to him. Is there ever a case where a player is on move and they are simply waiting for the opponent to return so they can resign?
I've been in that situation before where my opponent leaves and I'm about to resign, and then it puts me in an awkward situation. Mm-hmm. Like, do I resign and then go up and shake his hand? If I'm about to resign, I usually just play a move to provoke my opponent to come back.
Good idea.
Then maybe I'll wait for them to play one more move because I don't like resigning on my opponent's move, and then I'll just shake hands.
Sure.
But I'm also the type of player I like to fight even when things seem hopeless. I would certainly not resign in this position. I'd probably play a move like King H1 or maybe something like Queen. I don't know, Queen H3 also seems sad. But I would at least play on some more moves to see how Black is actually going to win this position.
Eric, we have a result, and it comes from Group B once more. Akshat Chandra has lost with White, and Belarusian Sergei Azarov gets the victory. We have not looked at that game yet, right? I don't think
we have not, no. Akshat Chandra, a St. Louis local. I saw him before the round. He looked energized. He looked ready to fight. But we see this final position is quite resignable. The knight is attacked 3 times on c3, and it's pinned to the queen. Yeah, seems pretty hopeless here. Maybe we can go back. I'm not sure how the game unfolded. It was another one of these Catalan games. We haven't been taking a look at too many openings in too many of the games so far, but the trademark of the Catalan with the bishop fee and Catalan on g2 has occurred in a few games so far, and this game went in Black's favor. Let's play forward here because there's a lot of tension in the position, and it seems like Black is the one expanding in the center. It's pawn e4 move, just completely shutting down this really sad bishop now on g2. And after bishop take f6, queen take f6, Black gets the bishop pair, and just seems like White is passive. This reminds me a little bit of the Steven Zerk game, where Black is the one activating the pieces from early on, and White's pieces, not the best coordinated group of pieces, with the queen kind of out of play on b1, and Black is the one building up pressure. See, there are further exchanges here, and the rook activates on d2. Now this queen is severely out of play, and there's already threats against this f2 pawn. Going forward here, rook f1 seemed like pretty much forced move. Rook b2, very nice move, taking advantage of the fact queen is controlling b2, and this b3 pawn is loose. Queen d3 was played. After bishop take e4, queen take e4, rook take b3, Black just goes up a clean pawn, keeping the initiative, and it seems like everything worked out well for Black. Sometimes when your pieces are in better squares and there's a lot of chaos in the position, a lot of trades and forcing lines, the outcome will ultimately benefit the side who is better placed. And it seems like that's what happened in this game. Pawn a4, the rook plants itself on b4.
I'm curious how this super pin developed at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like Black just kept the pressure. Like, these pieces are just so well coordinated. Another instance where everything in Black's position is defended. I mean, this whole setup with bishop on c5, supported by the b6 pawn, the rook supported by the pawn, and the bishop on or from b4, just seems like Black has everything under control. h4, not sure what that accomplishes, but very possible White is just stuck here. And positions like this are a bit torturous. When just stuck, you have no active play, and sometimes that can induce further mistakes. In this case, the knight went back to c3, and then after queen e5, just centralizing the queen, maybe even thinking of some ideas of taking on e3. Also getting out of any potential knight d5 check. Should go back and point out White was threatening knight d5. So queen e5 is a nice prophylactic move, restricting the knight, perhaps preparing rook to c4, which was ultimately played in the game. Rook d1, rook c4, and I think at this point it's just about over. Rook d3, bishop b4, and challenger resigned.
No more support.
Yeah, sad finish for Akshat, but a very good start for Azarov, who, if I'm not mistaken, I don't recall Azarov playing in a St. Louis event before.
He's a completely new name to me. Yeah, so no, I don't believe that he has.
I've played him once, many years ago, in a Blitz tournament in Washington, D.C., and I remember playing him and just getting completely outplayed both games. I believe I lost 0-2. It was a double round event. So I know he's a dangerous opponent, and not only dangerous to me, but clearly dangerous to the opponents in this field as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm looking at Hammer and Hansen again. The engine is calculating to mate. Looks like a foregone conclusion here. Sorry, everybody out there in the chat.
Yeah, let's go back to the current position. We see, yeah, what a sad move, King H1. Almost as sad as Hammer's expression during the game. And after Queen D2, just slowly building up pressure, just perhaps poking at the knight on E3. The knight is completely tied down. And it's a question, how does White deal with the simple threat of queen take E3? Actually, we should point out here that if queen take E3, there is queen take E5. But then there's probably queen E2, and so queen take E3 is probably a strong threat. And I'm not sure what White does here yet again. Seems like Eric is just so comfortable, just not even looking at the board. Okay, now he's looking at the board. Maybe just waiting for Hammer to resign. But I'm sure the people watching online, there's probably a large focus, especially on this game, given that not too often we can see Hammer play against Hansen in an over-the-board game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is actually... I mean, could you call this a dream game, perhaps? Maybe that's a little over-exaggeration, but...
I mean, out of the whole field in Group A, I think these two players have the biggest online personalities. I mean, they're both very well followed on Twitch, very active on chess.com. I mean, Hansen, part of the notorious Chess Bras, who, if I'm not mistaken, recently got a place in St. Louis. So...
Oh, they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. That's very true. It would be interesting to hear from the chats on YouTube and Twitch who they're rooting for, who they're looking to see win. It's hard to...
There's a lot of interest in this game. Then there's a lot of people rooting for the chess bra, Eric Hansen.
Sure.
And yeah, the conversation's kind of died down over this. They see it's a lock, essentially. We got a question earlier from Twitch, and unfortunately I don't have the submitter's name. They asked the ELO rating of the pumpkin.
Of the pumpkin?
Yes.
Well, there is a sticker on the pumpkin. I don't know if people can see this. It says 93134. Not sure what exactly that means, but it seems like a pretty high rating. Okay, there we see the game has ended. Mike Hummer putting the kings in the center of the board, taking away the score sheets. Seemed like Hammer just had enough, given that there was no way to defend against the onslaught of attack from Hansen. It would be nice to get Eric in the studio. I don't think I've ever interviewed Eric before, and it might be confusing with so many Erics in the studio, but...
Look, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. If we can get Eric, that'd be spectacular because, you know, Eric's a buddy of mine, I'm not going to lie. Eric and I, we both like, that Eric Hansen. We both like to watch MMA, we're both pro wrestling fans.
So you have many interests outside of chess.
Yeah, we're kind of friends. But as I was saying, this is it's not a good chess player. It's a pumpkin.
It's true. Only 99 cents.
Remember, everyone, follow us online. Join the conversation with #FallChessClassic. we are not going to be with you too much longer today, but the picture of the round is taking shape indeed. We have Eric Hansen with the lone victory in Group A thus far. And
I think the pumpkin deserves less focus, and the players deserve more focus, at least for now, because there are positions heating up.
Absolutely.
I do want to go back to this game between Alshan and Danish, because things are getting very sharp. And I was only taking a glance at this game earlier. Seems like the position has transformed tremendously. Maybe we can go back just to quickly try and evaluate this current position. Counting material here, White has what? White has 5 pawns against 3 pawns, but White is down a knight, so Black does have the material advantage. But visually, I really like White's chances here. I mean, this pawn in f5 seems undefendable. Combined with the idea of bishop c2, this seems like a bad moment for White. So, if we go back, let's see how the game unfolded. Let's actually jump back to where it left off before. Because we saw a nice sort of French structure for White. Very nice bishop controlling the long diagonal. Very bad 2 bishops for Black. Normally closed positions, bishops are not such happy pieces. In this case, both of Black's bishops very passive. I will note White's bishop is passive, but it doesn't matter too much because the bishop does keep d4 supported. So going forward here, f6 is played, a very typical French move. But to make this joke again, not a move that Ben Feingold would be happy about. Knight g4 is played. I really like this move, just applying pressure from multiple directions. There's now 3 attackers on the f6 pawn. Pawn f5 played, the knight retreats. And I think what White did was just provoke f5, given that there's now a target to attack. The pawn on f5 can now be perhaps removed. As we see White's next move, pawn g4, just breaking open the position, not only trying to open up the diagonal, but also trying to open up the g-file for a potential king h1 and rook g1. So seems like White has a lot of pressure from this position. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to go through the whole series here because we do have a special guest in the studio. Welcome to Eric Hansen, and congratulations on a very nice victory in round 1.
Thank you.
Now, I do have to ask, you just came back from Batumi.
Yes.
How was your experience there, and are you still overcoming some jet lag?
Definitely some jet lag. I think it's 9 hours, something like that. On the other hand, it was my first tournament in over a year, so I'm not as rusty as I was in Batumi, and at least I feel a bit more fresh. But yeah, otherwise the travel was like 30 hours, and it was pretty rough. I'm happy that I don't know, today's game. I was a lot more worried that it could have gone in a different direction because I didn't have much time to prepare. But
fair enough. And I do want to ask, because I was surprised to see you on the list as not having a world ranking because you're inactive.
Yes.
Are you making a comeback to tournament chess, or are you going to stick with the streaming as long as possible?
I wasn't planning on coming back. I had the Olympiad and I had this tournament I had to play the Olympiad, and I thought I might as well play in St. Louis. I've been invited a few times, but the scheduling didn't work. I was going to take a break after that or continue my semi-retirement, but it was so embarrassing the way I played at the Olympiad that I've made it a goal to play more actually, and try to actually push myself and play chess. So it's a very recent decision that I'm now looking to play tournaments and compete with some of the better players.
Yeah, fair enough. And hopefully you're warmed up and perhaps taking some momentum from this first round win. Take us through the game. It seemed like a somewhat unusual Najdorf line from Hammer.
Well, the good thing was Hammer plays everything, so I just didn't prepare for the game, and I didn't feel the need to because he's been mixing it up. And when he played e4, I was like, well, we play so much online and everywhere that might as well play something I haven't played. So I decided to go with the Sicilian and just see what he went for. And g3 is pretty common these days. What I like about the line is it seems like there's some pretty dynamic play for both sides, and there were some fun games at the Olympiad that I was watching where just all three results were in play. So I thought now that I was a bit, like I wasn't rusty, that I might as well play more in my energetic style. So it felt like the type of position where both sides get to do what they want. And I must say, the main thing about the opening here, I was happy to give away the bishop because I spent around 30, 40 minutes when he played knight d5 debating if I should keep the bishop or not. I've seen people play here instead of bishop b7. I think knight takes d5, queen takes d5, rook a7, bishop e3, bishop e6, let's say, queen d2, I was thinking, and now rook b7 or rook d7, let's say rook d7. And I've never had one of these positions, but I've seen something like it, and I mean, it looked maybe okay, but I wasn't sure if I could get in d5 properly, and felt like white had a little bit more control. I'm not used to playing with a rook on d7 and knight on, let's say, c6, so maybe this is playable. I think I've seen some games like that, but I decided to go for a more provocative approach, giving away the bishop. And the main reason I went for this is knight h4 was not a concern for me, and that's what took me a long time to realize that after queen e6, the knight f5 is hard to achieve. So let's say knight f5 right away. Originally, I didn't even think he could do this. But the point being here, if I take on e4 with, let's say, the knight, there's queen g4, and I, fortunately, I can't block with queen g6, and if g6, just bishop takes e4, and my rook on a8 is hanging in the end. So the tactics don't work out for me. But instead, and the same thing, if bishop takes e4, just take and queen g4.
Queen g4 still, yeah.
And I don't know, it didn't look good. But instead of that, I was just going to play d5, which is typical to undermine. But the one thing I was looking at was, hey, what about bishop h3? Because maybe it's awkward. But after king h8, I was like, actually, I'm not sure if that knight's very good there at all, because it's actually pinned, and unless there's something strong that he can do right here, then e4 is falling, and also I can even play g6 in some lines. But that knight just can't move. So this was the realization that made me go for this position, that I get really active, even though white has the two bishops. I didn't see a really good way to utilize them, and I get d5 very quickly. So in the game, yeah, for example, but then the knight on h4 isn't that strong if f5 isn't the key square. So I played knight d7, could have played, I can try to play d5 in some variations, and it's probably like fine for me. Usually you want to do that, but I was, at this point I was already feeling good. So knight d7, queen e2, rook c8, and c3, rook c4. I wanted to sacrifice an exchange. There's a game in the Olympiad, a teammate of ours in Montreal, Ivan Saric from Croatia. He was playing black, and he just sacrificed his rook for that light squared bishop and got like a winning position in a very similar
just
opening.
to take on e4?
Yeah, just just a very similar position, and he got a very, very comfortable game against Roger.
I was thinking you might want to play bishop to e4, knight to e4.
I mean, in this case, I'll just take with the bishop, but as an example, rook takes e4, just the light squares are so weak that that would also be a possibility. Because white's rooks aren't that useful. So he played f3, which was forced, and after d5...
And this just seemed very pleasant for you.
Yeah.
I mean, especially after f3 and knight h4, it seems like white is not finding any harmony.
For sure, and I mean, this all seemed pretty forced, and I was like, well, I'm very active, I have a lot of possibilities here. I didn't exactly know what to do. The one thing I've had issues with being rusty is time trouble, so around here I was trying to catch up a bit. I was down on the clock 20-30 minutes, and I just played natural moves instead of calculating. Like one thing I want to do, let's say instead of rook e8, let's just say rook back to c8.
So rook c8?
Yeah, I mean it looks pretty funny, but I want to play something like, first of all, e2 might be free, but otherwise bishop c4 and knight c5 is another threat because the queen is running out of real estate there. And this was also pretty tempting because right now there's no time to play b3. c3 is hanging in this line. There's some moves like bishop h3 that maybe it kicks me off, but I would be fairly similar to the game, and yeah, I thought this definitely deserved consideration, and maybe I should have gone for it. But yeah, there's just a bunch of pleasant options, and I just went for the natural moves. Put my rook on e8 because, well, the knight, if it ever gets to f5, will threaten knight e7 check, so just cover my bases.
So at what point did you feel like the game was really turning in your favor? Like, clearly you have a pleasant position here, but when was like decisive moment?
Here, I played all the easy moves, and after a5, after I played a5, I realized, well, we're both getting low on time, like 30 minutes for, let's say, 20 moves, and a4 is a pretty serious strategical threat here. He's just run out of easy moves himself. I've run out of moves with my pieces, but a5 is a great move to try to open up this diagonal. Around here, I thought he had to do something critical because a4 is coming, and you can't let me win the a-pawn, you can't let me put a piece on c4 probably. Also, you're just like, what's the bishop doing on g2, what's the knight doing on h4? So I thought black had a very good position here, and white had to go for something desperate, because you just don't want to play so passively, especially as you get down on time. Because at some point, I may play e4. I never played e4 because, well, it gives him, it weakens, maybe he can take, and his pieces also find some squares. Yeah. But later on, e4 is always a move he has to consider, and I just thought the tension was unpleasant to deal with. So it made sense that he decided to go for something concrete. And I think this was very interesting. It's a pawn sacrifice to activate all the pieces, and I didn't want to win a pawn. I'd much rather keep him in a bind. So for example, instead of bishop takes c4, so take once, bishop e6 would be like an ideal situation. I would take this, let's say bishop takes, rook takes. I want to keep the option of queen c5 check so that a5 is defended. Maybe just knight f5. It doesn't look pretty for white, but he's traded off some pieces, and I still need some sort of breakthrough.
Still takes work, yeah.
This still looks good for me, but I couldn't decide, and I decided I'll just take the pawn, be a pawn grabber. I usually don't do that, but.
Are you influenced by Yasser by any means?
I usually am not, but in this case, I was getting low on time, and I was like, I'm definitely better if I go for this, but he gets active now, and
it transforms the situation.
Transforms, because now knight e7 check is sometimes in the air. If I move my bishop, there's rook takes c8 and knight d6, forking my rook and queen. So my pieces are a little bit pinned here, and the h6 move is, well, I can't kick away the knight from f5 with pawns, so white sacrificed the pawn for a lot of activity. And here, I thought what he did made a lot of sense. If this isn't good for white, then I think he's just in a very bad position. Yeah, we go into this position where I win a pawn. It's all forced. Here, I was considering rook e to b8 to try to be fancy, but we're just low on time. I'm just trying to...
It seems like in the first round, players are more likely to get into time trouble than later rounds. Yeah. Is there a way to cope with that, to maybe be a bit more warmed up going into the first round? Or is
well, he was playing quickly in the first half, and it's only when it was a little uncomfortable he started taking some more time, especially here, there's some concrete things.
Sure.
For me, just playing a tournament beforehand helped. But the Olympiad, I was really shaky in the beginning of that, so always try to warm up some way. I think, yeah, I mean, in this case...
Well, it seemed like the finish was just amazing for you. It was just such domination.
Well, here I wasn't confident. I was happy that it's a 2-result game, but it's a pawn on the same side of the board. And what I wasn't sure, for example, is he kept the bishop on, but that also gives me more possibilities with my knights, because on the other hand, he could have traded the bishop for my knight on d7 and played an unpleasant endgame, especially because his king's a little bit weak. So as long as I keep the queen and the rook, black has practical chances. But by keeping the bishop on, the bishop's not necessarily a good piece, and I play e4 here, and it just shows my knights got very, very active. And as you get in time trouble, everyone knows how tricky knights are. But here the problem is his king is actually weak. So let's say he didn't take, but if he takes, knight c takes, let's say bishop takes, knight takes, and if you try to trade queens, let's say queen c2, I'll put my queen on b6, and you're just dealing with some serious suffering here. Because no matter where you put your king, it's going to be exposed to some...
It looks painful.
Yeah, it looks very painful. Maybe queen d4. Actually, put queen, go back. Oh no, I can't play queen d4. Yeah, something on the diagonal. But yeah, I'm going to get some long-term pressure.
It seems like situations like this, the advantage of king safety is more valuable than the advantage of having an extra pawn. But of course, both make it just so much better for black.
So here, he didn't want this. My knight can go to g5, and f3 and h3 get really weak. The pin is strong. It's hard to hold this. Looks really bad.
And so e4 is a nice move to just break open the position.
E4 is really necessary, especially because I actually don't have another move because he's covering everything. Now knight d3. I didn't calculate e takes f3. I was just thinking about this after the game. I guess there's some sort of back rank stuff, so this was his trick. E takes f3, rook c5, and I guess he has some sort of rook c8 check, hoping to liquidate everything. So let's say rook takes, rook check, and maybe this is fine for me.Maybe I have knight e8, and maybe he shouldn't go for this.
Looks a little bit scary, but maybe not necessary to go into.
Yeah, I didn't calculate this. Maybe this works as well, but what I did was very natural. Knight d3. His rook has to go back. And now rook 8, a1. I was just down to like a few seconds here. I made a mistake here. There's a very cool variation that I think works, although maybe I have something better. F takes e4 instead of bishop takes. And the idea is, if rook a2, we play like the game. He thought his bishop would be bad. Queen d1. Queen b2, and now queen c2. And the point is, first of all, he's starting queen c8 mate, but if I trade everything there, which looks great, he has e5 in the end. Take, rook takes, and e5.
Hitting everything.
And I didn't have much time, and I might have allowed this, but then this is, I think this is just a...
White's okay.
Yeah, white's okay. But he's starting mate at the same time if I don't play queen b2. I mean, when the queen's on so I have to find a different variation. And black is still pushing because he's got the second rank, better pawn structure and everything. But I only had a few seconds, so if I went for this line and he found that, then I would have lost it. So something still felt bad about my conversion. But it doesn't make sense to take on e4 with the pawn unless you see that, because yeah, your bishop on f5 can be blockaded in some lines, and you just want to trade some pieces.
So much more natural to take with the bishop, but okay, the resulting position was just incredible for black.
Yeah, I think now it's just forced, and now it's much worse. Well, just lost queen b2, queen h5, knight e5, and he's in. I mean, I don't need to find a win right away. He just has no moves.
Seemed close to Zugzwang.
Yeah, it's going to be Zugzwang at some point. Yeah, there's just no moves because every piece is doing defensive. Well, white's just only defending, but there's no perpetuals, so I can even go piece hunting because my knight on e5 just saves, like just does everything.
Right, everything's tied down for white.
And this was move 40, so this was very nice because then I could
sit back, relax,
and
we saw that on the RoboCam. You were relaxing, taking a walk, and he was just looking so sad.
Yeah, no, unfortunately for you here, there's just no moves. I can't say this was all planned for me, and as I said, there was a bit of a shaky conversion, but I was happy with the pressure I put on. Yeah, I was telling myself, even if I don't win this game, playing energetically, playing a little bit faster, those are some positives, because in Batumi I was a time trouble addict.
Sure. Now, I do want to ask, do you know your lifetime score against Hammer in online play? I'm sure it could be looked up. Do you usually get the better of him?
It's pretty back and forth. We've had some like heartbreakers. I beat him in a key match in the Pro League. We beat him and Magnus, their team,
very nice,
because of my final game against him. He beat me in a death match this year with a pretty epic comeback. We've traded a lot of wins and losses. So I'd say generally we're pretty close, pretty competitive, and I always enjoy playing him.
And one last question: will you be doing any sort of streaming or vlogging during this tournament? Or are you going to stay focused on chess?
I would like to, but this is the strongest tournament I've ever played in, 2650, whatever average rating, and I've been away for a month from North America, and I'm hoping maybe Amon streams and maybe some other people cover it, but For myself, I don't think I can manage playing against such strong opponents and streaming at the same time. I'm hoping you guys are covering, which is really nice, and we'll see what we do on our channel. But I'll try to focus because I don't have any tournaments after this. So this one I'll try to put some good effort in, and I can get back to the stream after the tournament.
Sounds good. Well, we won't keep you here any longer. Congrats again on winning the first game, and best of luck in the rest of your rounds.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on here and take a look. There's been a number of games still finished. I do want to take a look at the game between Elshan Moradiabadi and Danish Boros. That ended decisively in Elshan's favor. Seems like a pretty brutal finish. White being down a piece in the final position, but let's just go back a few moves and see how this unfolded. After the queen, actually after the pawn lands on h6, the bishop was forced to retreat. This is a very nice configuration for white, where the pawns on dark squares really restrict this dark squared bishop, which is one of the lone defenders of the black king side. After bishop f8, queen is happy to take on f5, king g8, queen g6 check, and we see that black is just going down pretty hard here. I can imagine if king h8, there would be maybe some move like bishop take d5, taking advantage of the pin, maybe even some move like bishop c2, threatening mate on c2. So very good start for Elshan. So I do want to welcome back Ben Simon to the studio.
Oh, hello.
Ben, I know you just had a nice break. Do you have any results for us? Any progress with either group so far?
This has been a bloody day, okay? This is going to be a fun tournament, I can tell already, because Group B looks to be 100% decisive after this is over, and Group A isn't that far off. There's only one there's only one game left in B, but besides the victory that Elshan had over Boros, we had Ashwin Jaram taking on Conrad Holt, and Ashwin got the victory there. I don't think we have glanced at that one too much.
We did not. We were not looking at that game. Ashwin is a former teammate of mine, having attended Webster University, and he now lives and works in St. Louis. Going back here, it seemed like a somewhat dry rook endgame. The position they had around move 30 just seems very drawish, but perhaps a slight pull for white, given that black does have double pawns on the queen side. Also the fact that white's rook is simply more active than black's rook. So sometimes you can take like small advantages in these rook endings and convert them to much larger advantages. I don't know if we can get the board up here, but maybe not.
Yeah, let's see if we can have Ashwin's game with Conrad up on the screen. There we go.
I was going to say, for the time being, people can admire the pumpkin,
yes.
But I think people are probably more interested in the chess. So, wow, so they went into a king-pawn ending pretty abruptly. Rook take e6. This is a type of move that, if you're a grandmaster and you're about to go into a king-pawn ending, you should be at the ability where you can calculate and know whether it's winning or drawn. Now, this king-pawn ending seems pretty complex just on the surface, because there's a number of ways black can activate the king, and I would imagine that Ashwin took a lot of time to capture on e6, knowing that it's a very committal move. Now, of course, white is the one clearly playing for a win here, given that black's pawn structure across the board is shattered. And going back to the premise of pawn islands, these are two very scenic pawn islands, as you'd say, just well put together, no immediate weaknesses for white. So let's see how play unfolded. Both sides activate the kings. Conrad gets his king to the center first, and sometimes it becomes a game of who runs out of time earlier, where the kings get into some opposition situation, and then it's a matter of making waiting moves. And for the next several moves, both sides push some pawns. a3, simply a waiting move. Pawn e5. f3, this is a nice move to restrict the e-pawn from advancing further. Black advances on the the king side, pawn b3, pawn b5, king e3. And now we're in a situation where it seems like black is running out of moves, given that there's only so many pawns left to push. Really just a b7 and h7 pawn. And if the black king ever moves from this configuration, it would give away the e4 square, which is a very valuable square for the white king. And it looks like this is what happened. Seems like accurate play by Ashwin, just simply waiting king d3, nice move. And the white king penetrates, king d6, king f5, and white's king just gets in sooner, and now it becomes a race where white is just so much faster, picking up the h-pawn, and then soon to queen his own h-pawn. Just a few more moves were played. b4, nice way to slow down black on the queen side. And this is just, it's like a cheetah versus a turtle, where the cheetah runs down the h-file, the turtle is just too slow on the queen side. So nice start by Ashwin Jairam.
Yeah, you know, the first time I ever met Ashwin, actually, it was right here at the club, and he had won a Millionaire Chess satellite. I think it was for the first Millionaire Chess back in 2014. It was a lot of hoopla. So you know, it's nice to see him back here doing well. We already took a final look at Group B. If we can, do we have the results for Group A, as they are? I know 3 games are pending. Yes. So Eric Hansen, of course, with the lone victory thus far. It looks like we might have a couple of more victories, though. Dreyev and Spirits are in good shape, and then Akobian and Robson drew earlier today. But we don't have much time left for today, so it's just about time to say goodbye, Eric.
That's right. We should make a note that if viewers want to continue watching the games, you can do so at uschesschamps.com. There's links to the Chess24 link. You can also rewatch the broadcast on YouTube or Twitch. I believe the games are also being broadcast on leechess.org, which then gives you access to Stockfish and the opening database and table base. So lots of ways to keep up with the action.
You really have your pick. However you want it, you can have it. So that will do it for today. Remember, the rest of the rounds, up until the final round, are later than they were today. Tomorrow, the round starts at 1 p.m. Central Time, and we will be on the air at 3:30 p.m. Central Time for our 90-minute wrap-up show. Okay, well, that will do it for today. For International Master Eric Rosen, I'm Ben Simon. This show was produced by the world's greatest production B team. Tammy Hyde is the streamer. Kite Lee was a huge assistant in getting our cameras working today. Eric Mosel is the designer of the show. Isaac Schrantz, graphics and audio, and Danny Machuca is your technical director. So until tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Central, we say so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.